Hello all, I'm back from holiday and we're going to get really stuck in, I think, over the next couple of months to just all of this mythicism stuff. I know I've released quite a few videos on the subject already, but what I'm trying to do is really firmly establish the two kind of waves, broad waves, or the two phases, I should say, of the development of Christianity in the 1st and 2nd century. I've actually found some pretty interesting stuff. I know this must have been covered by others, I was going to say scholars. I'm not a scholar. And what I'm going to do is run this through Power Director so we can have a look at just the numbers of early Christians. Some, obviously, I think most considered fairly orthodox mainstream Christians. Clement of Alexandria, the Epistle of Barnabas. Some say it's a forgery. It might contain some interesting little nuggets of the thinking of early Christians. But this is about 100 to 130 BC by common estimates. The Shepherd of Amass, obviously we've been through. Ignatius of Antioch, again 7 letters, 3 in the earliest recension. That's probably the most likely to be something resembling a true history. Polycarp of Smyrna, again very minimal. These are kind of moral exhortations, very minimal history indeed. Papias of Hierapolis, Quadratus of Athens, Aristides of Athens, again, Mathetes, who I didn't actually, I heard of the epistle to Diogenes, but this Mathetes fella, I hadn't come across him. Again, 130 to 140 or later. Logos-based theology, basically entirely. Then you get Justin, who gives us, and I put this in here, really interesting because I mentioned mentions of Mary, the virgin birth, mention of Pilate, mention of the 12 disciples. So I tried to find 4 very common things you're going to find in the New Testament Gospels that tally really nicely with historicity. So mentioning Pilate, for example, obviously that would place Jesus really decently, neatly in history and not being crucified or murdered, whatever, by the archons or archonte, cosmocratos is used sometimes in the Greek in St. Paul. Tatian, again, this is coming into the period where we can begin to really establish there being gospels that are written. Of course, this is the time of Marcion as well, about the 140s. So this is a good point here, pivot point, a kind of nexus for actual gospel works as we can find them in history. Let me be clear about that. And speculatively, of course, there might have been gospels in the 70s or 80s. In a speculative sense, but the crazy thing is, Second Clement, again, this is pseudepigraphal sayings of Jesus, but in altered form here, and largely based on the Old Testament. Again, Hegesippus really doesn't talk about, these are fragments from Eusebius, doesn't talk about gospel events, really talks much more about James, and his account of the death of James is just not feasibly historical. It doesn't make much sense. It's fan fiction. Melito of Sardis, 160 to 170 now. Old Testament typology only, nothing to do with the historical Christ. And even after the Gospels are written, lots of Christians don't seem to be getting wind of them. Theophilus of Antioch, Logos theology, again mentions Gospels just once, likely hasn't read them, or maybe I think it might be Gospel just once. And Athenagoras of Athens, again nothing of the virgin birth, no mention of Mary, for example. Pilate, the 12 disciples. Polonius of Hierapolis again mentions Pilate. Now we get one mention of Pilate. This is definitely maybe 2 or 3 decades after the first Gospels are being written. Clement of Alexandria again. So here's the important thing, right? When you get to the 180s, and you get Irenaeus, he's not in here because he does mention all of the 4 Gospels and basically mentions everything, all of this list here. You get Tertullian, Hippolytus of Rome, Origen. But we get Macinius Felix again around the 180 to maybe 200 mark, talking about Logos theology only. So even in parts of the Christian church in and around the Levant, the Middle East and so on, you're still getting Christians who don't know the gospel accounts. It's primarily a Logos theology, minimal history here, but you can almost see the flowchart of how this is all coming together. So lots and lots of X's here, a few ticks. Justin Martyr, again, we've covered him, what he doesn't know about the Gospels. It's all minimal. He might be referencing 5 or 6 lines from some kind of gospel narration, but it's equally possible he's just using oral law, oral tradition. He never says he's quoting Gospels. He has no knowledge of parables or of any of the stories of Jesus. Nothing really concrete that comes from the Gospels. He's written 3 works. They're all quite long, well, reasonably long. I've been going through the first Apology again, which is twice as long as the second. And he's talking in kind of creedal terms, long creedal statements. The same kind of stuff you find in Paul to a large extent, but nothing really concrete, and definitely nothing of the miracles, transfiguration. He mentions the apostles almost in passing. We don't have much at all. Even with Justin, he's talking broadly about the morality of Christians over pagans and so on, and really making his case alongside pagan philosophy and theology, trying to distinguish Jesus and Christianity as the next best, wonderful, awesome, great thing everyone should be going with. So here I just put these 2 Christians we hadn't talked about before: Mathetes dating and historicity versus mythicist readings. So Potiers 130, 150, possibly later. Now under an historicist reading here, references to Jesus dwelling among us can simply imply the way that Paul talks about this spirit, the spirit of Jesus dwelling among people, apostles who are open to the revelation of Christ. Mythicist reading, again, language could be figurative or spiritual visitation, absent of core markers. Any absence here of real core markers for history, they're all there. So we can't be sure about any of these guys' writings. And this is well into the 2nd century now. Apollinaris of Hierapolis dating, again, so 170 to 180 now. Again, this is when Irenaeus is talking. It looks as though 4 Gospels have been agreed upon and written by this point. But there are still problems with saying that even these Gospels are going to be the Gospels that come to us in the 5th or 4th century with the Council of Nicaea and so on, with the other fella there later. Sorry, I can't remember his name. Athanasius, that's it. And even after the Council of Nicaea, things are still being added to the canonical kind of list of documents. Mythicist reading here of Apollinaris of Hierapolis references could be liturgical, theological, lack of Mary birth, virgin birth, 12 disciples, miracles, or any detailed narrative undermining historical claims. Again, pre-180, so nearly all writers omit key narrative anchors such as Mary. So we see all this pre-180. There's no strong indication apart from Justin, and I think one other in one of the other guys here who does talk about Mary. I think he talks about miracles once. I think that might be Aristides of Athens, and he does mention the virgin birth and mentions the 12 disciples. So this is between 125 and 140. That is an important outlier here, and this is coming to us, I think, from Eusebius again, who has been known to add his own embellishments. We can be fairly sure of that. He even says he's doing as much. So post-90s, and again, multiple authors, Clement of Alexandria, Tertullian, Origen, regularly name and use these anchors within a narrative context. So we have a tipping point, a pivot point, a new way of looking at Christianity. So just to refresh what we've all been talking about, and I think I might go through some of these guys, these people here, and really again begin to flesh out what is going on. But I thought that would be quite interesting to cover quickly, just to refresh our memories on these very important topics regarding the first 2 centuries of the Christian era. So I'm going to leave that there. I hope I'm not repeating myself too much now. I don't want to be, but I think it's nice to refresh people's memories. And I found 2 other early Christians here. Again, they're not these works are not necessarily from these times. They're often echoed by authors, historians later on. But it's all rather interesting, and it just shows us that when we're trying to find real evidence of Gospels or any concrete narrative, forget Gospels, any narratives whatsoever talking about Jesus's ministry, or why not, let's include any accounts of Jesus's lost years, any extra biblical accounts. Why not? If he was a human being, why aren't there other things there? I know my barrier here for inclusion is quite low, high, I'm trying to find these works. I think it's really important that we try and look, but they just don't seem to be there in any historical accounts. And I understand, what I was trying to say was, I know I might be being a bit unfair here because this is 2,000 years ago, but we are left with a surprising hole where there should be stories about Jesus, and we can assume that there would be a lot more if Jesus had existed, from Christian communities, from the Romans, from Jews. We have basically nothing, and this all fits in with the mythicist narrative here of Jesus first being a God, being felt through humans in Revelation, just as we have a whole almost unified world mythos of inner teachings, of an inner spirit coming down and touching those who are worthy, and them being given insights and so on. Now I'm not gonna go on anymore. I'm sorry about that. All interesting stuff. Anyway, take care. Bye bye.